Welcome to episode 80 of the High Volume Hiring Podcast. I am one of your two co-hosts. I'm Stephen Rothberg. I'm the founder of College Recruiter Job Search Site. And I am joined today on this cold and blustery day by my co-host, Jeanette Leeds. Jeanette, great to see you again.
Hello, great to see you too on the last episode of the year. It's crazy, 2024. So we are here today with Jon Puckett, who, Jon, let's say you have over 20 years of experience in the HR tech industry, and you are the CEO of Cadient. And we're so happy to have you here on the last show of the year. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome. Well, why don't we kick it off with just give our listeners a quick background, like who you are, what is Cadient, in case they're like, wait, what, who are they?
Yeah.
Easy question.
So I started in this industry back in the late 90s, if I'm going to date myself. And at the time was working for Unicrew, which was really the pioneer in hourly hiring ATS business. And through the progression, I spent some time working through my career at Kronos, which I'm sure a lot of people know, which is now UKG, and then eventually evolved into to Cadient, and became the CEO of Cadient about a year and a half ago. So it has been an interesting ride, especially with all the changes in technology on the hiring side, and obviously with the pandemic and just the overall changes that we've seen on the hourly business. Cadient still focuses on primarily on hourly hiring, mass hiring for large retailers, but we work with organizations, large enterprise organizations, all the way down to SMB. So that is just a quick synopsis. I've been in the industry for many, many years, and have worked a lot of different aspects of the organizations that I've been involved with.
Cool. That's great. I think our listeners, whether they're like watching on LinkedIn or YouTube or listening to the audio only version on like Apple or Spotify, now they're like, oh, I totally get why he's on this show.
So, I value hiring.
Hopefully so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was, sort of like when you have problems in the workforce, right? And those can be all different kinds of things. How does that impact your recruitment? How does that impact your retention? You coming from the ATS side gives you some really good visibility into how that looks across a whole bunch of different employers. So maybe you can sort of talk at a high level, like employers that are having workplace problems of some kind. How does that impact retention and recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, this, I'll call it a labor shortage, on the hourly side. It's affecting retail, hospitality, manufacturing. I mean, there's just hardly any industry that's employing large numbers of hourly employees that's not been impacted by this. And, I think it stems from just, whether it's pay, which has definitely been, in the headlines of, more higher demand for pay, access to benefits. So many hourly employees are part-time and don't have access to benefits. They don't really have career growth options. And, and then just, flexibility in their scheduling, which I think stems a lot from flexibility we saw with a lot of jobs during the pandemic, and sort of brought that to light. So what I've seen is organizations are having to really change their policies and their direction on all these different areas to be able to attract and retain hourly employees.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because in some ways, look, we're about to go into 2025. The pandemic feels like it was a while ago, but yet it also feels like it was a minute ago. But this is still, this labor shortage for hourly work. It's still going on. So we know these organizations, so many have these, not, or what would be the word, unattractive workplace policies for, as you have. Okay. So you have them. Like, what are some strategies you're starting to see that people, like, some of this you can't change. I mean, you can, try and change it, but if you can't,
Yeah.
what advice do you have for the TA leaders here? It's like,
Yeah.
combat that? How do they increase retention?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is, I'll look at this from two different aspects, on the hiring side as well as the retention.
Yeah.
On the hiring side, companies, I think both, just from the overall challenges we're having at the labor market and just availability of candidates, you also have, a social shift of people want to work for companies that match their beliefs, their cultural beliefs.
Yeah.
And so what we've seen on the hiring side is companies are really having to promote what they do socially for the, for the world, what their culture is. Having the ability to post videos of what a day in a life of this job is going to be has really been an important part of the attract side. And then obviously AI technology is coming heavily into play on both sides. But open, transparent communication to the applicants throughout the entire process, so they always know where do I stand in this process, is critical. Once they're hired, I think it's just a matter of having, again, the tools in place to allow the flexibility with scheduling, ensuring that communication is transparent. You have the ability to have recognition programs, opportunities for growth in their career, and still have some of that flexibility. Again, and I think there's lots of tools that have been put into place that have really helped organizations to manage a lot of those aspects to continue to help them retain these employees once they're hired. And obviously, I think company culture and having an engaging culture is really key into keeping them.
One of the things that we were talking about just before hitting the record button was that Cadient, because of being an ATS, but beyond that, right? It goes beyond the point of hire. You have insight, I think, at least with some of your clients, correct me wrong, maybe it's all of them, as to the retention.
Yes.
And that's something that a lot of employers don't have. The systems don't talk well to each other. So they might know that their lowest cost per hire or lowest cost per application is, and I'm just making this up, Indeed, might be LinkedIn, it might be career fairs, whatever. But a lot of them don't have very good visibility into then what happens. And from our conversations, you do. So spill the beans.
So we have lots of data on this, and many years of data on this, and definitely provide insight to our customers around what is working. And what we see, just to be straightforward, is somebody who goes to Indeed to apply, they can apply to 20 different jobs in one click, which is great on the applicant side. But from an employer's perspective, they're getting a ton of candidates coming in. But for those applicants that are being hired that come in through that method, what we see in our data is that they're less likely to stay on the job longer, because they've applied to many other jobs and they're constantly being re-engaged by other organizations trying to get them to come and work for them. And so if you're not maintaining all of those other things I just mentioned, that to try to keep that employee engaged and retained, you're going to lose them. And so what our data shows is applicants that are coming in from these large job boards don't typically stay on the job as long. And so putting other methods in place to attract employees, whether it's referral programs or just, having, again, sort of that information on your website about your culture and having them come directly to you to apply, we see that those applicants who get hired stay longer on the job.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because one of the things I'm thinking about is I've had so many conversations over the years with um I would say hiring managers at times who are, I would say a little more old school, who are like, we're going to make this application process much more onerous, right? So like someone listening might be like, oh, well, it's so easy to apply in these jobs. I'm going to make this, forget about all this other good stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to just make the application process so much longer because then those candidates really want to work here. Like,
Yeah.
can you maybe just talk about why that's not a good idea if someone just
Oh,
out there?
yeah, I can definitely talk to that because
Yeah.
that's what we've seen, especially over, I
Right.
would say, the last 5 years.
Yeah.
We went from application processes that included, 50 questions, surveys, and assessments, and they want to be able to hire in the click of a button. They want the application process to be a click of a button. We have reduced the overall size of the application process probably by 10 in most of the organizations we work with. We have seen it, they come to us and say, what can we remove from the process but still get the information we need? And what we've also seen is that the collection of the data that's needed is done in segments to keep the applicant engaged. You start out just by getting their name and their interest in the job, and then you reach out to them and get a little more information about their skill sets or their work history, and then you reach out and get a little bit more until you get what you need to be able to make that decision. And that plays into just, again, keeping the applicants engaged through the entire process.
I think we got time for one more question. I just want to follow up on what you just said, Jon, the segments, right? Nobody's saying that you cannot collect information from these candidates that you need to hire them. It's a question of when, right? You don't have to do it all at the beginning, right? So here's the question. You're very data driven, which is why I wanted you on the show. And that is, and if Jeanette did or didn't, that's up to her. I'm just kidding. It's like, wait a second, aren't we a team here? So anyway, the question I had for you, Jon, is when you've got like these high volume retail kinds of clients, and they come to you, it seems to me that you're probably getting asked, how long should the process be? Like, it's one thing to say it's too long, it's too little, right? What is the sweet spot? Do you say it should take 5 minutes, 12 minutes, 18 minutes? Like, is there like a range where for those sorts of roles, it's like, that's a good spot to be in?
Honestly, I think it really does vary by organization, and it depends on what what challenges we're trying to solve for them, and what they need to be able to make that decision. So what we try to do is understand what it is they need in order to make a decision, provide them the tools, whether that is through AI technology, through carving the process up so it happens in segments. And I will say this, we consider AI technology augmented intelligence at Cadient, because we don't ever see the human aspect being removed from hiring.
Agree.
We are augmenting that process to try to make sure that we're keeping the applicants engaged, that we're providing the hiring managers the information they need to make a decision and to find the right candidate, and to do that quickly, easily, efficiently. So it does vary, and we consult with each of our clients, and I think that that's really important to say. What works for one organization might not exactly work for another, but overall, we absolutely have seen the apply process for applicants has greatly changed in the last 5 years, where you have to do certain things to get them the information they need to even get them to want to apply, and then you have to keep them engaged through the entire process, or they're gone. They've got 5 other companies they're talking to potentially.
Cool. Well, Jeanette, I think we're going to have Jon on another time so that he can
Yes,
explain to us. So he can explain to us why, come hell or high water, the application process needs to be somewhere between 5 minutes and 13 seconds and 5 minutes and 16 seconds.
Right.
And that 3-second no, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
No,
it's a big difference.
It actually, I mean, look, we live in this world of so much like instant gratification and engagement. If we think about, being on TikTok or, maybe Facebook, if you're a little email. Like it's just these constant real, like, so everything needs to be short, sweet, just like this podcast.
Exactly. Exactly.
Imagine.
Short, not necessarily sweet, but whatever. Jeanette, Jon, for all the J's involved in this podcast, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Happy New
thank
Year.
you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Happy
Happy
New
New
Year,
Year. Thanks for
everyone.
having me on.
Cheers to 2025 and all that it brings. Thanks for being
Cheers.
with us today, Jon. Take care. Bye, everyone.